I'm Allison Berryhill, and I teach English at Atlantic High School. I teach juniors and seniors composition and journalism as well. And this is my third year with AIW. And I find myself beginning to integrate the terminology, the thinking more naturally at this stage of my teaching. And one thing that I've found is that AIW really reinforces what I know is my best teaching. We all like to tell ourselves that we're pretty good teachers, and we get to the end of the day and we would rather focus on the things that we did right than dwell on the parts that didn't go right. But AIW gives me a lens to evaluate my teaching maybe a little more bravely. I can look at things and I can see where maybe my students' communication with each other wasn't necessarily building off each other. They were just giving me simple answers, or I can recognize where maybe I fell short in my hot questioning. So it gives me that lens, that prism to maybe more bravely and honestly look at what's working in my classroom and what's not working in my classroom. And I think I've always been a teacher who's been really interested in value beyond school. From 30 years ago when I first taught, I was always trying to find ways to get the kids writing for people in the community and things like that. So that part came pretty naturally to me. But AIW gives me permission to do that, because that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of, it's sometimes messy. And I think that good teaching often is messy. Good teaching and involves unknowns, and I mean, you bring in the community, you don't know what's going to happen. Things are a little more out of your control, and that's both what I like about AIW, but I think it also scares some people, because you do have to give up control when you start asking questions that you don't know the answers to, or you have to give up control when you are making learning truly authentic, and these kids are sharing their thoughts and building their ideas, and what? They're not just building towards the idea that I had already in place and wanted them to come to. So, so AIW is messy, but it gives me permission to let it be that way, because that's where the good authentic learning comes from. I wanted to tell you about an incident that happened to me last week. I had a lesson prepared, and I looked at it and I knew it was okay. But I saw that with just a few tweaks I could make it much more interactive, and I could have my students split up and work together. And so I wanted to get to that. But before I could get to that, I had some information input, some lecturing that I needed to do. And so I had a PowerPoint. And as I was putting that information out to my students, and I was talking with them, and I don't think I'm a bad lecturer. I use lots of examples, and I, excuse me, I try to engage the students, and but when I would ask a question, and one student would answer, and then I'd ask another question, and another student would answer, I thought I could improve this significantly if I just stop and have them talk to each other. I could just raise its AIW score right here. And so the next pause that I came to, and I asked a question, I said, turn to your partner and discuss it. And I was surprised and chagrined to see them turn to each other and say, I don't know, I wasn't listening, were you listening? And it just reminded me that these kids know how to play this school game. When I'm throwing out a question and only one person needs to answer, everyone steps up, takes their turn, and I'll answer a question, and then I can kind of zone out a little bit. Well, you answer a question, then I'll zone out, and you answer a question. And it's all this subliminal understanding that students have that we need to keep this school game going. And when I stop and do things according to AIW that doesn't allow for kids to shut down, just the overall learning in the classroom goes up. And so then, I mean, it was a real quick tweak. All I said was, all right, after this next slide, I'm going to ask you to turn to your partner, share what you, I think we were doing something on journalism, share how this aspect of the history of journalism was impacted by technology. And just by framing it that way for them, their absorption of my content increased, the conversation that then happened at the end of the slide was much stronger. So that was just an example of a quick way that happened.
Going to take a break?
Well, or just keep going because you can cut that part out. Because I was going to tell you about a strategy that I developed based on AIW thinking, and I've loved it, and so I have to tell you because I think that other teachers could use this too. I have wanted my students, when I break them into pairs or small groups, to have that elaborated communication, the sustained conversation that goes back and forth and back and forth. And what happens sometimes when I throw out a question is that one person gives her opinion and the other person doesn't really want to contradict that opinion, so they say, well, yeah, okay, I agree. So it's basically the first one to talk that is the answer that is given. And I wanted them to build on each other and to be encouraged to build on each other. So I asked them to, I have a marker, to have a piece of paper there while they are talking, and not even look at their hand or the pencil, but just have it there on the paper. And then when I say something, I move it over here. And now when you say something, I move my pencil back here. And then I say something, and we go back and forth. We don't even look at this while we're talking. And then we stop and we say, oh, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Similar to what we do when we are scoring instruction, but my students do it themselves. And if you look on the backboard, we were even doing it with a whole class today, back there. Because this, if I have a thought that I'm almost ready to say, I'm so much more encouraged to say it if I know that we get to move this line down rather than withholding it. And if I could ask a question, we could move it one more. And sometimes I give them goals. I say I'd like to see a jet stream of 10, or I want to see see if you can't get to seven zigzags on this question. And so that just pushes them to go ahead and articulate those thoughts. So that was an AIW thing that I did.
My name is Elizabeth Huggins. I am a third-year teacher in Atlantic, Iowa. I mostly teach 9th graders, but I've taught a variety of subjects at a variety of levels, including core level readers who are anywhere from 3 to 14 years below expected reading level. American Lit, which is an honors level survey, British literature, 9 honors language arts, 9 regular, second chance reading. So in my few years, I've had the opportunity to teach a wide variety of subjects. And I really love teaching. I think part of what makes AIW beneficial is also what makes it difficult. We all feel like we're in the classroom and we're trying really hard, and often we're excited about our content, and being able to admit that I'm not teaching this the best way is hard. I think it's been easier for me as a first-year teacher, or as a young teacher in many ways, because I'm used to having people in my classroom, and I'm used to having people point out, you could tweak this, you could change this, you could make it a little bit different. But I think the biggest thing to remember is what makes AIW beneficial is what makes it hard. That sometimes taking constructive feedback hurts. And being able to be mature enough and say, it's not about me. You know, I think that's the big thing with AIW, is the recognition that yes, it's about making you a better teacher, but you becoming a better teacher is not about you. It's about the kids in your classroom. And I certainly found AIW to be challenging in my first few years. And it was challenging because I so often as a teacher felt like I wasn't getting a pat on the back, that people weren't recognizing the good things I was doing. And then I would come into this situation and get good feedback, but there was just something about it that felt a little bit scary. Working with people and for people is a little bit scary. It just is. And it's also a little bit scary that there are teachers in the classroom who never change what they teach. And they are not teaching people. They are teaching content. And I guess this is just my touchstone phrase for this interview. What makes AIW beneficial is what makes it hard. Knowing that your job is going to be work every day. You know, that even when you get a lesson that's absolutely out of the ballpark for one group of kids, you may turn around the next year and need to change it. And AIW means hard work. It means you're going to work at your job as long as you do it. Which again, very beneficial, but very hard. One of the things that it is important for teachers to constantly be considering that AIW has brought to the surface at my school, and specifically in my language arts department, is this idea of what are we grading and why are we grading it? Are we grading kids because they play school well? Too often, it is lower order thinking that's easy to grade. And that's what gets in the grade book. And what we teach our kids is, here's the carrot, come and get it. This discussion that was born out of AIW about higher order thinking, are we giving our kids something to chew over? Are we expecting our students to really engage their brain, or are we expecting them to play school? And there are any number of lessons that I have looked at and thought, add in a higher order thinking component. Will it make it more difficult to grade? Yes, I'm a teacher. I grade. Do I want to sit there and mark A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D? Or do I want to go to bed knowing that, man, I taught the snot out of this. And not only did they get it, but they got it. They got it. They really got it. And so, for example, I teach the novel Speak to my 9th graders. It's a little bit low for them in terms of reading level, but the content and the concepts are right on for their age group. And I want them to have choice, and I want them to engage with the text in a variety of manners. And so over the years, this is now the 4th time I've taught the novel, I have developed an assignment where they have to do 3 projects. One is lower order thinking. It's worth 2 points. One is middle of the road deep thinking, a little bit of reproduction, 5 points. And then one is higher order thinking. And they have to do one of each, and it makes it very tangible for the kids to say, how much thinking am I really doing here? And it's made it very easy for me to put a value in the grade book that shows, listen, honey, you can write 5 discussion questions, hoppity-scoppity. It's fantastic.
2 points.
It's 2 points. And when you rewrite a monologue from a different character's perspective, and you have to consider how somebody else is going to see the scene and see the emotional core of the scene, that's 10 points. Why? Because you had to do that higher order thinking. You have to look at a scene through a different pair of eyes and think about situations and how different people might respond to them. And it's been really great. And sometimes my kids say to me, higher order thinking is hard. Yeah. School should be challenging.